Are Darkshards with shields any good? Okay, one of you asked for some Dark Elves love. I mean the platonic kind. Love of their campaign units, yes. And if we're going to do that, we need the backbone of the entire roster. Darkshards with shields. I'm not even kidding. Please like, subscribe, comment, and consider donating through my Ko-fi page. And even if not, the comments are great and I enjoy hearing from you. Darkshards come in at 90 models on Ultra with 5670 HP divided between them, which sounds squishy, and it is. Get used to it. The Dark Elf roster trends that way. Armor is 30, and I have made a point to cover the variant with shields because it is the true backbone of your forces. The shields this variant uses are silver grade, blocking 55% of small arms fire, which is extremely important in duels with other missile units. Leadership is 56, and that's only okay. The Dark Elves aren't that big on trust and loyalty, you see. Speed is 33, very mid. Melee attack is 18 with an attack interval of 4.3 with max splash targets damage of 4. That's unusual, but anyway. Melee defense is 24. Of course, you do not want them in melee. Not because they are atrocious. They are poor rather than atrocious, but because you're utterly trashing their combat power if they're in melee. Having said that, weapon strength is 24, divided between 19 base and 5 armor piercing. 5 AP is 2 better than Warhound's units. I mentioned this for when we compared to, let's say, Shades in later videos. Charge bonus is 6 and mass is 100. Yeah, not expected, but very flimsy. Now the important part, ranged combat. Ammunition begins at 18 volleys, but there's a caveat for that to come. Starting range is 125, and I say starting because that's something which can be modified heavily by lords and somewhat by techs, depending on choices as well as some degree of luck. Missile damage is given a nominal value of 20, with each projectile doing 3 base damage and 11 armor piercing. That's right, a low-level missile unit with reliable, spammable armor piercing. This is what defines the Dark Elf roster. What's also very important to go over is that the reload time is 14 seconds, and the projectiles fired are 2 per volley. This double crossbow design is a Dark Elf specialty, so even though that reload time murders your DPS on paper, each opportunity to fire is front-loaded with serious damage, a total of 6 base and 22 armor piercing, split across the 2 projectiles. Let's say you're facing something with 55% missile block chance, like these Darkshards themselves. This effect means that it's quite likely at least one of the projectiles will get past the shield. This is also to say that reload time reduction is especially potent. The higher the base number, the more a percentage-based reduction is worth. I'm sure you're wondering, okay, so what's with these shields? How do they do in duels with other missile units? Horrible! 55% block doesn't change the fact this is a low armor unit, it functions at a range disadvantage and has low HP, middling leadership only, and only 90 models, which compared to other ones can be low and the unit tends to break and rout from damage frequently. Shields only drag it up to a potentially adequate level. The thing to keep in mind is that this reflects crossbow units in history generally. They aren't great at missile unit duels. Moving on, we have total accuracy listed in the datamine stats as 20, which is pretty normal. Calibration distance is 90, which means that past 90 range, the projectiles get less accurate. You can see this in my footage. Once the AI stops doing weird things and settles down at least. Calibration area is 3.4, which means there's a decent amount of spread. What this boils down to is that the Darkshards are incredible for destroying things archers usually struggle with. Chariots, heavily armored single entities, preferably of large size, and cavalry whenever they can be trapped under fire. Over time, Darkshards can do incredible damage, which makes them precious when defending walls. That's where having shields really helps. Open field, mileage varies. For the red lines, I'm using the Dreadlord as my standard. Sheaf Master adds a maximum of 20% ammunition and an 8% reduction in reload time, which as I explained is really important for them. For Dreadlords, Rally is replaced with Loose with an exclamation mark, and adds 10 reload skill within a 35-meter radius as a passive ability. I stripped my Dreadlord of abilities and items for the video though. For rank 7 vets, Call the Unworthy adds 10 armor, 12% melee weapon strength, 12% missile strength, and 15% missile resistance, which is a godsend given the types of enemies Dark Elves routinely fight. Note that Dreadlords can upgrade the passive to Darken the Skies to add 20 reload skill, which is really awesome. In the tech tree, quite a few general upgrades affect Darkshards, but what matters to you most is Forged to Kill, adding 10% missile strength, and Reworked Crossbows, which adds 15% range and 20% ammunition. You started with 18, now you have more. Campaign considerations mainly have to do with which legendary lord you're using, and whether names of power roll your way for the generics. As for recruitment, that comes from your basic military building on land, or a basic military building that has to be consciously and deliberately built on Black Arts. Since, if you were smart and got the DLC with real value for the Dark Elves, you get masters from that military building at Tier 2, you would get access to Darkshards with shields early and often. At any rate, the Darkshards are both very powerful and very brittle. They can turn the tide against sickeningly armored single entities in a way other factions would sacrifice to the Dark Gods to obtain, and yet will melt against basic archers if allowed to, or dismantled in melee combat with rudimentary melee troops. How, then, do you truly use and abuse them? Well, it's not in these videos, but ideally you want heroes like Masters on foot, or single entities of some sort to assemble a blob, and turn the backs of anybody with a shield, and then you fire into that. Anything you can do to slow enemies down, the better. Shoot into their sides and backs? Great. This requires a playstyle where you are finding ways to mess up the enemy's archers without using the Darkshards to do it, unless absolutely necessary, because ideally they are undamaged and emptying their ammo into the right targets. Yes, you can shoot at lords on foot, but it's difficult and inefficient. They are Dark Elves. You should have magic available or a convenient lord around to help deal with that. Most importantly, compared to other options on the roster, Darkshards with shields are still relatively cheap, and the Dark Elves are limited by the economy, not by unit caps. You can and will spam these to the extent necessary. That's why I call them the true backbone. You build around them. That also means that they're useless on their own in the long run. The fragility is real, and if they're routing or dead, they can't shoot pointy things into enemy heads. The flip side is that a heavily buffed group of Darkshards firing into the right enemy, or the right blob, is a thing of dark, vicious beauty. And like I said, they're cheap-ish. Devote the big bucks to other stuff of use to you, chariots, monsters, and you stretch the enemy's attention away from your own infantry line and make it much easier to shoot them in the flanks and backs, which is ideal for Dark Elves, vicious punks that they are. Take care and have fun turning dragons into scaly pincushions. When it works, it works.